The illusion of progress, why vigilance matters in the fight for equity. Imagine a world where we've solved racial inequity, where discrimination is a relic of the past, where opportunity flows freely to all with talent and drive, regardless of skin color. It's a beautiful vision, isn't it? A comforting narrative we desperately want to believe. But what if this narrative, this story of inevitable progress, is the very thing holding us back? I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Erica Harry, a visionary researcher and advocate whose groundbreaking work has fundamentally transformed how we understand racial equity in America. For those who don't know her, Erica has spent the last decade meticulously documenting the lived experiences of Black professionals navigating today's workplace. Her fearless commitment to truth telling has forced institutions to confront uncomfortable realities and inspired a generation of change makers. She doesn't just study barriers, she dismantles them. What Erica shared with me wasn't just illuminating, it was a wake up call that shattered my comfortable assumptions about progress in America. Progress, she told me, is not a train that moves forward on its own momentum. It's more like a boulder we push uphill. The moment we stop pushing, it rolls back down. The evidence? Despite the proliferation of diversity statements and inclusion initiatives across corporate America, racial discrimination charges filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission rose by 10% in 2024, not a decade ago, not during some bygone era we'd prefer to forget last year. Let that sink in for a moment. A 10% increase in racial discrimination complaints, while corporate America was plastering Black Lives Matter on websites and running diversity commercials. This spike occurred precisely as many organizations were quietly scaling back their DEI efforts, creating a stark disconnect between public commitments and workplace realities. The data points to an uncomfortable truth: progress isn't linear. Advances can stall, gains can be reversed, and without sustained vigilance, the ground beneath our feet can shift with alarming speed. Conventional wisdom suggests that once barriers fall, they stay down. Once minds open, they remain open. Once policies change, the new normal becomes permanent. But Erica's research reveals a more complex reality, one where progress requires constant tending. Like a garden that, now left unattended, quickly returns to wilderness. In 2024, Black employees across industries reported increased bias during promotions, stereotyping in performance evaluations, and culturally insensitive workplace practices. Perhaps most tellingly, many witnessed the dismantling of the very DEI departments established to address these issues. Why was this happening? As Erica discovered, after years where diversity had been publicly prioritized, diversity fatigue had quietly set in among leadership teams. The very concept of equity work was being reframed, not as essential to organizational health, but as a luxury that could be trimmed when convenient. They called it returning to core business priorities, one executive confided to Erica, as if ensuring equal opportunity wasn't a core business priority. The response from advocacy groups was swift and strategic. They developed toolkits for self advocacy. Legal clinics offered guidance on navigating complaints. Professional associations amplified reporting channels. And gradually, more workers became aware of their rights. Some companies reinstated DEI training after facing public pressure. Several high profile cases led to settlements or policy changes. But here's what's truly remarkable: this data served as a wake up call industry wide regarding complacency around equity issues. It reminded us that rights, once won, must be vigilantly protected. This brings me to the first key insight from my conversation with Erica. Progress isn't guaranteed. The recent increase in racial discrimination charges shows that setbacks can occur even after periods of apparent advancement. Black professionals must remain proactive in advocating for equitable treatment and holding organizations accountable. But discrimination in the workplace is just one dimension of a multifaceted challenge. For Black entrepreneurs, a different but equally persistent barrier exists: access to capital. Research using the Kaufman Firm survey found something particularly troubling. Even highly qualified Black entrepreneurs apply less frequently for business loans than their white peers. Not because they don't need the capital, not because they're less ambitious, but because they anticipate rejection even when their credit histories are strong. This anticipatory discrimination creates a vicious cycle. Systemic bias leads banks toward lower approval rates for Black applicants. Awareness of this bias leads qualified Black entrepreneurs to submit fewer applications. Limited family wealth, itself a product of historical exclusion from wealth building tools like home ownership, further constrains startup size and growth potential compared with other demographic groups. Erica shared the story of Marcus, a tech entrepreneur with impeccable credentials, a solid business plan, and strong early traction. I didn't even bother applying to traditional banks, he told her. Why put myself through that humiliation when the statistics tell me what will happen? Instead, he cobbled together funding from friends and family, raising less capital than he needed, which limited his growth potential from day one. The patterns we see today reflect generations long exclusion from the very financial instruments that historically funded small business creation elsewhere. This isn't ancient history, it's the lived economic reality for entrepreneurs right now. But here too, communities are developing innovative solutions. Alternative financing models, including peer lending circles and partnerships with mission driven community development financial institutions, help bypass traditional gatekeepers. Entrepreneurs using these resources report higher rates of survival past the critical early years, even if overall capital raised remains below average compared to white owned startups. These interventions have documented measurable improvements where alternative capital sources were deployed intentionally within communities most affected by banking disparities. They're pushing policymakers toward targeted interventions supporting entrepreneurship as an engine for broader economic mobility. This leads to our second key insight from Erica's work. Access to capital remains unequal, not because of lack of credit worthiness, but due to systemic biases and expectations of being denied loans. Overcoming this requires both individual resilience and collective action to change lending practices. So, what can be done in the face of these persistent challenges? This is where our third insight emerges. Community matters. MelaninCon, an annual Washington, D.C. based conference designed specifically for empowering Black business leaders, offers a powerful example. Participants often cite isolation within predominantly white industries and lack access to mentors who understand their unique cultural experiences or the barriers they face. The conference addresses these gaps through workshops on thriving as a minority entrepreneur, mental health support sessions tailored for business owners facing race based stressors, pitch competitions offering real funding through initiatives like the $8,000 Scholar Pitch, and HBCU student sponsorships connecting young talent with established leaders. The outcomes speak volumes. Attendees report expanded networks leading directly to new collaborations or investments. Students gain exposure otherwise unavailable through traditional career fairs. Panel discussions spark actionable ideas implemented post event. What makes this example particularly powerful is its origin story. MelaninCon wasn't created by a major corporation or government initiative. It was founded out of necessity when local leaders recognized gaps left by mainstream conferences failing to address specific needs within the community. The impact has been profound. Successful ventures have launched from pitch winners. Partner firms have increased representation following mentorship connections made at the event. Perhaps most importantly, MelaninCon has strengthened the pipeline from HBCUs into professional fields while fostering pride and visibility among emerging leaders. As Maya Angelou wisely reminded us, when you know better, you do better. The knowledge Erica Harry has shared through her research empowers us all to do better, to recognize that networking, mentorship, and collaborative opportunities can help counteract institutional barriers by providing support systems tailored specifically for Black professionals and entrepreneurs. So, where does this leave us? With three powerful truths that challenge our conventional thinking about progress. First, progress isn't guaranteed. The recent increase in racial discrimination charges shows that setbacks can occur even after periods of apparent advancement. Second, access to capital remains unequal, not because of lack of credit worthiness, but due to systemic biases and expectations of being denied loans. Third, community matters. Events like MelaninCon demonstrate the power of community driven initiatives in providing tailored support systems. These insights point to a fundamental rethinking of how we approach equity work. Rather than seeing it as a destination we'll eventually reach, we must recognize it as an ongoing practice requiring constant vigilance and renewal. The question becomes not, have we made progress, but rather, are we actively dismantling barriers today? Not, do we have diversity initiatives, but are those initiatives producing measurable results? Not, have we checked the box, but have we changed the system? As Audre Lorde powerfully stated, revolution is not a one time event. Neither is the work of creating truly equitable workplaces and economies. It requires sustained commitment, clear eyed assessment of where we stand, and the courage to acknowledge when we're moving backward instead of forward. I want to leave you with this: the comfortable narrative of inevitable progress is a sedative. It lulls us into passivity. It whispers rest. Others will carry the load. But the data screams otherwise. The stories of those on the front lines tell a different tale. Today, I challenge you to reject the illusion of guaranteed progress. I challenge you to become a guardian of equity, not just in your words, but in your daily actions. Ask the uncomfortable questions in your workplace. Examine the lending practices at your financial institution. Create spaces where isolated voices can find community. Remember, history doesn't bend toward justice on its own end. We bend it with our vigilance, our courage, and our unwillingness to accept anything less than true equity. The future isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create decision by decision, day by day. What will you do tomorrow to bend that arc? What conversation will you initiate? What system will you question? What barrier will you help dismantle? The time for passive hope is over. The time for vigilant action is now.